Paul, delighted to have you with us today. I'm going to go straight into the compliments. It's a great, genuinely, it's great to have you on to have a conversation because you're one of the people who I always think about when I think about people who have given it everything in terms of their commitment and their attention to detail and preparation. And I was lucky enough to have a lots of really positive conversations with you. This is going to be slightly different. We're not going to go into the detail of performance, nutrition, and what we would have talked about week to week. It's more about how you've adapted to life after sport and what we feel is important to communicate to the wider world, men, women, but particular people who maybe have families and who struggle to prioritize a healthy lifestyle. But maybe for the team here and people who are watching at home, maybe you can do your own little introduction first.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. Always good to chat. I know we would always I say I probably challenged you a decent bit when we were working together, and equally you challenged me. So, and still having good discussions about this type of stuff. But so yeah, like I played for Dublin footballers from since 2007. Would have played underage before that, and but it was in 2007 I made my breakthrough year. When I say made my breakthrough year, I got onto the panel. Everything is a growth process, and was delighted to be a part of it for 2007, 2008. Kind of made my debut in the championship, and then it kind of grew from there. And like my season or my career is probably there was kind of two halves to it. Really, the first half was probably really about me kind of growing and trying to get up to that level, adapting. You know, if you knew what I was eating around them times, geez, things I've learned. I learned along the way as much as anybody. And how I was preparing was entirely different. But you just have to learn these things. But anyway, the first couple of years we would have won a couple of Leinster titles, which wasn't to be sniffed at. And I was certainly very grateful for them at the time. But we weren't able to make that big breakthrough onto the All Ireland scene. We would have fallen short a number of quarterfinals, semi-finals, up until 2011. And 2011, obviously, Dublin won their first All Ireland in 16 years, and I was a part of that panel playing wing forward. 2012, we just came up shy against Mayo. 13, we won it again, and 14 we came up shy against Donegal, and then 15, 16, 17, and 18. Then I was part of the panel that was four in a row. Within that 4 year period of 15 to 18, I had two surgeries. One on my groin, which was an ongoing chronic injury, and one on my back. I had a lumbar spine disectomy in 2018. I think it was, yeah, 2018. And it took me around 4 months to get back, and I got back onto the pitch just for the latter end of 2018. Um, but it was creaking, and in 19, I came back. Got myself into probably the best shape I'd been ever in, and coming into 2019 from a body composition point of view. Typically would have been, Daniel will testify to this, probably was always around the 11.5%. And I remember we would have went to the same DEXA scanner, so they would have get printed us off our reports from the previous scans, and they were always hovering around the 11s. And in nine, I just went the hell for leather out. I got it down to, I can't recall, was it like, was it 9% or was it 8 point? Anyway, it was in
It
around
was
that.
9%. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was, but anyway, the point was I got myself back into a great physical condition, but just couldn't keep up the repeated sprintability that my position required because of a lot of the chronic stuff that was happening, in particular the back, and had a tough call to make. Yeah, and I suppose what I needed to do to get myself back into the team was to train harder, push the body, harder than I'd ever done before, and I couldn't do it. And probably psychologically couldn't do it as much as physically as well. I'd gone to the well so many times. I was 33 years of age, and yeah, it just kind of felt right. So anyway, I bowed out, and since then being competitive still with the club, which just dials the tempo back a little bit, but I was able
Mhm.
to still play. And only up until this year now, I've been kind of injury free, but this year the back is creaking again. So but yeah, so that's kind of where my that's probably in a nutshell my career.
That's the fastest summary of a football career I've ever got. Thank you. There's a lot more to it, and we will touch on it. I absolutely do want to touch on it, but I have actually have never asked you what within your own home and within a younger Paul Flynn, what type of influences were there from a lifestyle perspective, and where did you cook as a teenager? Was food on your radar as a young athlete?
Oh my God. I'm the youngest of eight, right? And six sisters and one brother. And um, unashamedly, I was mollycoddled to a certain degree, especially by Mammy Flynn. So to think of me cooking as a teenager, I think she probably would have beat me out of the kitchen in fear of what
Really?
might happen. Yeah. But she really minded me, to be fair now, and then I also got fairly supportive sisters there. So no is the answer to that question. But however, I'm fairly good now, dab hand, and partly then not blowing smoke, but like a lot got to do, the influence you have and you had on us as a team, not just in like, probably guiding us to what kind of foods you should be eating, the information around your macros, dialing things specifically for you as an individual, but also that appreciation for food and appreciation for preparing your own food and the process of it and understanding it that bit more. And I don't think that's something that's probably left me now, that like, and I'm lucky too, Fiona, my wife, she would have played for the Dublin senior ladies as well for a number of years, so she gets it, and we both kind of with the best will in the world, we both try to keep preparing and having good eating habits.
What, because this is really important to us as a team. So we're in a bit of a bubble around how we feel about the value of food, and you've expressed it really well. Do you think you could give us any kind of insight to how that grew or how that evolved? Because if we think about our world, it's linked so closely to body composition, and it's not that there isn't that isn't important and that there isn't a really important aspect of that, but you've expressed it in a slightly different way. How did that develop for you?
Um, I guess education, probably, Daniel. Like, I suppose you don't know what you don't know, right? And like I would have always thought, even in my early stages of my career, when I like, okay, it's okay looking back now and saying I wasn't eating as well as I was at the latter end of my career, but I felt I was eating really well, I would have woke up every day. I would have had, easily had six Weetabix, and I would have probably had, brown bread sandwiches at lunchtime, and so I would have been eating things like Nutri-Grain bars, and at the time I was thinking these are what I need to be eating. I would have been drinking Lucasades, and you back then I felt, right, I'm doing the right things. And that's important too when it comes to nutrition, right? If you think you're doing the right things, it gives you that fuels, that confidence inside you that your body is prepared. It's just a placebo effect as much as anything else. And when I was that young and training and playing on multiple teams and training as hard as I was, calorie intake was just the most important thing. I was going to burn it off, and I was probably genetically lucky enough too that like that was never a concern. But I suppose then I got kind of when I got into my career and we start weighing, weighing in and weighing out, and that kind of, that definitely makes a difference because I would have been kind of, we had a good few debates about this, Daniel, in relation to as I was getting older in my career, um, and probably not performing to the level that I wanted to. You're trying to find, okay, what kind of things can I do? What levers can I pull? And I have a big challenges with you about, I want to get down, I want to get my body weight down to 88 kg. I was at 90 because I want to shed this 2 kg because I don't want to carry this around the pitch, So I think I'm going on a bit, but the point
You're
I'm making
not.
is
This is all really
education.
important. Mm,
Education is critical,
mm.
and just being open-minded to keep on learning. And if someone's doing something, asking, well, why are you doing that, and what impact is that going to have, what happens if I do dial back the weight to 88, but I and then you're saying, okay, well, It's okay if you dial back maybe a bit of lean fat, or a bit of fat mass, but you don't want to be dialing back on your muscle mass. And I guess, yeah, it's down to education. You have to be open minded, and be up for learning as you go along on the journey.
What do you think? We had lots of debates, and I think that that's really healthy and that's really important. What do you think about your detail and your mindset towards your preparation? Like when you think about it now, do you think it was mostly positive? What were the positive things that came from that curiosity? Because I mean, that's a key attribute to have as an athlete for that growth and development. Was it mostly positive?
Was what mostly positive? Sorry, Daniel.
That curiosity, that debate that we used to have, like even you looking, I would have strongly encouraged you to look in other places, and to ensure that you were fueled in order to train. So it didn't compromise your immunity. It didn't increase the risk of injury, that you didn't creak more under the demands, that your body was fueled in order to do those demands. If you're in a calorie deficit, that puts you at greater risk. So there's a sweet spot between your curiosity and your drive in one way, and us, I suppose, having the relationship in order to have some type of a compromise in what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, like the intent was probably always positive, I suppose. Like it was always a one goal to improve the performances on the pitch, right? And Um, I tried loads of different things, even, and I'm not even sure whether you gave me the green light or not. I definitely tried a few bits, like, the intermittent fasting at times. Would have tried that. Would have tried, like, caffeine and adding that, beetroot shots.
Resveratrol.
Yeah, every look, whatever. Like, I was always interested, and we would always have good conversations with this about pushing the boundaries, and what kind of nutritional, add-ons can help me to
Mm-hmm.
go faster, go longer, get leaner, get stronger. So that, like, and then you have to just, there's no one size fits all with these things. Like, we would have had guys who were taking creatine, and not something that I ever did. Funny enough, just didn't think that it was something that I needed. Rightly or wrongly, it was just in my head. Like, I didn't want to build up. I wanted to stay lean. So you just have to, yeah, the curiosity is important, but then you just have to understand when to do it, why you're doing it, and be okay to, like, that some don't work. Like, so for example, caffeine, comes with a warning. I remember going into some games, and I, like, was, ready to run through a wall, because of the amount of caffeine that that I had taken. But I couldn't compose myself on the ball. I was like a madman running around trying to get the ball back, and then I get it, and I was like too hyped up. So I dialed that back, or you just take it less, or you take, so you have to understand your own body and your own, tolerance to these different,
You came in
so
at halftime like a bull, and you said, "That's the last time I'm taking caffeine again. That's it."
yeah. And look, but you know what? Like, it's not fair to say that, because I could have just been hyped up over other things that were going on in my
Mm.
life, but you blame something, and that got the blame on that day. That kind of way.
Yeah.
I've taken it since, and I'm okay now with it. But you just don't
Mm.
understand how to take it, and maybe making sure that you take it for like 2 or 3 training sessions before you go into a big game and take it. Because that would be, crazy, just to try something new just the day before a game or the day of a game. So but like everyone, I can't stress how everyone's different, like, and that's it is no, like, people say, "Oh, can you come and talk to me about nutrition?" I'm like, well, one, I'm not qualified to, but like, two, everyone is different, and you
Mm.
have to understand yourself first, and your own, your own needs and what you're trying to achieve, um, and then, what suits your own body.
No, it's what we're talking about is years of experience. We're talking about trial and error. We're talking about lots of different conversations. You're curious and you're looking for improvement, and you have to trust me as a practitioner to support you and to find the best ways to achieve those things. What I don't know how you're going to respond to this question, but I'm really interested in your answer in whatever way that you can share, and that is around the relationship that you had with food and body composition. Because, you know, as an athlete, you want to be lean and you want at the same time to be incredibly energized. Like, it is really hard mentally to figure out exactly how to get that sweet spot, you know, and that's something that we're seeing a lot of people struggling with even their relationship with food. And that was why at the earlier part of the conversation, when you talked about the value of food and how you didn't go talk about the way that food makes you feel, but that's such an important aspect of this, people having a positive relationship with food. Is there anything that you feel like you'd express on your journey around that as an athlete?
I always found it harder to um, improve my body composition while I was trying to perform. You know, I felt that because there's, yeah, like I'd be paranoid about not being fueled up to perform to a certain degree that I wouldn't risk, um, skipping meals or dialing back on the body composition. And some guys did, and they were okay with it, but I always just got a bit paranoid that I just wasn't going to have that a bit of energy. And I just still wonder about that. Like, I even thinking back, not that I think back a lot about this, but now that you say, I still wonder, like, I'd love to have done what I did in 2019 in relation to getting down to 9%. I would have loved to do that a couple of years earlier to see what would have actually happened, because I do recall a patch of that 19 before it kind of got too hectic that I was feeling very light on my feet. I was in a January, like, winning sprints, winning runs that I probably wouldn't have been doing a couple of years earlier. And now, as I said, the injuries were not allowing me to keep it going, but I just do wonder about that, Danny, and I still challenge you about that because it is important to be fueled up, but I still think that getting yourself down to your lowest possible body composition that suits you is only beneficial. That's
You,
my uneducated view on
mm,
it.
you've said something very important though. You've identified a period of time, and this is the challenge, particularly in GAA, with the off season for most teams being so long, and it'll depend then on the success of your club. But you got yourself into the best possible shape in the off season when it is the time to do it. So in professional sports, sorry, it's off season coming into the preseason. You came in flying, and that's very, very different than trying to do that at a point in the year where your body is under the most physical stress and physical demands, which are games. So, you know, absolutely, if you had tried to achieve that or do that much earlier, but that's a very, very hard thing to do when you're still winning. You know, you're still at a point where you went through the most successful period, and you need your mental break too. You know, you can't have that off. there was Jamaica, and there was, so that, you know, there was all of these trips that you still have to go away and enjoy those.
The way I did it too was different. Like I would have always assumed I had to run to get myself into that shape, and I actually did it through doing 4 gym sessions a week and not running at all, um, and changing the stimulus to a certain degree, like where got a personal trainer, and me and two others, we just did personal training, like for 3 sessions and then our own session, and it made the difference. Like it kind of did exercise I never usually do, and did an hour long intense gym session. Literally barely able to move the next day, and that like anyway. So it was changing the stimulus probably helped that too, and I did balance up the macros. I got the got myself into a calorie deficit, which, I think that I always remember when I was in college, I did PE and biology, and I always remember getting a presentation. Actually, Niall Moyna, Daniel, well, and he's not a specialist, I don't think, in nutrition. You might tell me I'm wrong, but
No, he's not.
but something resonated with me in the presentation that he did, right? And it was just a balance of if you have to be, you have to be in a calorie deficit to lose weight, you know, and like I think that's it's the key thing, you know, and like that you have to understand, you know, you can do whatever kind of diet that you wish, you know, but if it understanding calorie deficit is key, and that's why you learn enough, like, you know, learn it with you too, and but it's harder to do when you're in season, but in an off season you can really get into that.
Mm. Before I move on to the next phase of the conversation, because I want to move on to what I think can really help people, and that transition. Just want to put it back to the team. Is there anything in listening to this that you want to ask Paul or you want to comment on? Because myself and Eva, I'm not pointing this to you, Eva, in particular, but myself and Eva were only talking about the value of the work done in the off season. And culturally in the GAA, off season is off season. Whereas I remember you and also Conor Callaghan was another athlete. But I remember between September and November, dropped 2 kilos of fat mass, gained 3 kilos of muscle mass, 5 kilo shift. You know, I can think of countless athletes who made those type of changes. But just to the team, is there anything you want to mention?
I suppose just a question for me, Paul, is like year on year coming in from winning All Ireland, what was kind of in your head as for you to think, right, how can I be better the next year? Or would you have found that even maybe teammates around you were just happy enough with where they were? Or what kind of really pushed you on to think of, right, what can I do better this year to progress myself as a player? Or even I don't know if I've worded that quite right, but it's really like for your own self-development each year, what was really kind of your main driver?
Yeah, good question. Eva, there was two probably, if just thinking off the top of my head. One would have been my own pretty hard on myself, always pretty hard on myself, and always, you know, looking at my game at the end of the season saying, okay, even if it was a good year, even if, you know, things had gone well, I still would often see things through the areas where I could improve more than the things that went well. And it was just it, you know, to nearly to the level that you don't really enjoy the journey as much because you're always critiquing yourself. I was probably my number one critic. And that's the same with a game. You know, you might come off a game, you might, you know, kick a few points, but I'd be just cringing that night about, you know, whether I've been dropping the ball or missing the pass or missing a tackle or, you know, so that kind of carried into the off season too, absolutely. And you'd always be, and that led into then the second part, which is it would lead you to a stage where you'd be like, okay, well, this guy or that guy is going to take my jersey, and we were, you know, in the squad that we had, that was very plausible. That definitely would have happened if I didn't up my game. You know, if you stood still, someone would have overtaken you because there was not a big gap between, you know, the number one person in a certain position and even the number three person. Like there was, and someone could just slot in. So between my own being hard on myself, and just, you know, trying to get better every year. And also then the fact that if I didn't, you know, someone else could take my jersey. They're probably the two main drivers even.
With working with other teams, you might find that people might come complacent if they feel that they have their place on the team. So I think having people around you that are always pushing you in a positive direction is really beneficial for you, but actually the whole team.
Jim Gavin was he always used to refer to the aviation industry because it's what he would have like known and been very passionate about. And it's a bit extreme, right? But it's in his world. It obviously he works in airline compliance and that regulatory space. And I think in pilot's terms, complacency leads to death. And it would have been, you know, something that always struck me very, very extreme, not as relevant, but the idea of it is the same. Is that like, you know, if you become complacent, you know, you're not going to perform to the levels that you should, and you're not going to grow. And that idea, growth mindset, you have to keep kind of challenging yourself, taking yourself out of your comfort zone, and layering on. Otherwise, you know, people will overtake you. You know, so a bit of an extreme quote, but it does resonates with you, the importance of not being complacent, essentially.
Did you find it that as the years went on that you were able to nearly analyze what needed to you talked about self-criticizing, and I suppose there's things within that and the drivers that make you want to be better, but then there's becoming effective in terms of your ability to do better and perform better. Did you find like over the years that you were able to refine your process?
I wish I could say yes to that, Gemma. But I'd say no to it. I didn't. I probably only know that now since I've come out of it and kind of got a bit of perspective on football and life and performance. And I guess my probably issue was that I overthought a lot of them things, and which I think is so common in athletes, like that, the more you learn, the more you kind of try to layer, and that can then cause you to just overthink things, or it can cause you to do too much. And even like for take nutrition, for example, like um if you spend a load of time thinking about it, talking about it, preparing for it, it can just sometimes add to what's already overwhelming being an athlete, with the psychology, with the physical elements of it, with the technical elements of it. Like, and I probably did more shooting practice when I was getting older, thinking I needed to sharpen it up. I reckon now I need to do less of it, So I think with the perspective now of my whole career, I'd say the key to my probably purple patch in my career was just keeping it simple, and okay, you didn't not do the work, but you just didn't overthink it. You just kind of went out and let it be, and I think all the studies would probably suggest that you get into the zone that bit easier, yeah, more often when you're just not thinking, and I'd say my issue at the end of my career was I overthought things to a certain degree, Gemma. So I think that can be kind of double-edged swords. Um, and now I'm back in the club, and I know it's a different level, now it's a different standard, and but you just I think don't think about it at all, and you just the things that, like for example shooting, they it's way better because I'm not even practicing, I'm not really thinking about it because I know how to do it, and you're just calm and you're just present, I suppose. So sorry, Jim, if that's not the answer that you
No,
want.
that's a
I wish for me it was too, because I probably would have got more out of my individual performances, like especially at the latter end. So I think I'd say that's common enough, right? But maybe not.
No, it's a brilliant answer. I love listening to this, Paul. It's so good. It's brought me right back into the dressing room. Can I ask you? I'm so fascinated with people's own different types of preparation, and I have absolutely no problem saying I learned an awful lot from being in that dressing room, and I learned so much from being around you. And one of the things that was so obvious to me was, while you're saying there that you may have overthought things, there was an energy that you gave off, and there's a positivity that you give off that was really infectious. Were you always like that? And I'm talking about the way that on All Ireland Day, you could be dancing around the dressing room to music. Were you always that person, or did you evolve into that person?
I'd say that part's natural enough, that's probably the giddiness in me. So that is natural, that's not like something that would have evolved, and that's just who I am, So, and there's a little bit of that as nervous tension too, it's kind of, it's adrenaline in the body, and, it's probably a little bit overzealous because of that, but not saying I overthought this too, but you'd be trying to let that steam off by just being lighthearted and, having fun and trying to enjoy it that bit more. Because that's so important, and, I always think of Jack McCaffrey walking around in the parade, for a guy, he's smiling his head off, looking into the crowd. And I didn't smile my head off looking into the crowd, but I did do that. I did look into the crowd with a kind of internal smile anyway, as if to say, like, look what we're at here. Like, it's pretty cool, and sometimes you just don't actually just take that few seconds to do it. Um, so yeah, and they're kind of like the things I miss, Daniel, funny enough, like, is that kind of that energy around game day, very hard to recreate that whatever you do, like,
I,
it's actually impossible.
I was only a staff member, you know, and I don't mean only a staff member, but I've played the game, and that is the closest I've ever come to playing the game. That's the closest. It is being a part of something and being in a dressing room where the energy felt like that, where it was simply electric and so positive. And not everybody was doing, everybody could do their own thing. And I just thought that the freedom that there was in the dressing room for you to behave like that, and for me to feel impacted and to be allowed to feel impacted by it. I think it was very, I mean, we know it was really special, but I think that understanding the, knowing that that's the right thing for you before a big game is so important. And I spent so much of my time, the reason I'm bringing it up is I spent so much of my playing career being too serious, you know, it being and thinking that that was the way that it should be. And I felt like that was such an enlightenment.
That is the right thing sometimes for some people. Like, you know, that's the thing about it. This is no different than anything. You have to figure out what's the right thing for you to do. Some people need to be serious. Some people need to sit in the corner looking at their notes to say, okay, here's my KPIs, here's the opposition analysis. You know, so it's all about understanding your own, what makes you tick.
100%. But what I'm saying is, it was too late, and I just wish I could have had way more crack and way more fun, and that's what would have allowed me to perform better. We had a conversation only a couple of days ago, and I really got into the mindset of strike on these notes when they feel really strong and you feel really strongly about them. But we had a conversation just organically about the changes that occur in the body as we age, and there's mental and physical adjustments. It's not how will I put this? You are still a high performing athlete. You are still playing football at a high level, and you've got a structure in your life. But for me, I suppose I don't have that, dealing with certain injuries and things like that, and it's been a big transition. How have you found that transition?
Firstly, a correction. I'm definitely not a high performing athlete anymore. Which that's definitely I play, you know, I train, you know, but like everybody, you know, well, a lot of people train, you know, and definitely to higher levels than I do currently. But look,
What are you doing?
I'm still trying to take away playing with the club, but it's been very frustrating for me this season. The back is just it's creaking again and just causing, you know, sciatica down both legs, you know, which I've pulled like I've aggravated a tendon at the back of my knee on 4 occasions already this year. Last night being one of them, which is entirely frustrating coming up to championship. But it's so I can't do the same types of training that I would have always done. So that's really frustrating. And what's happening as a result of that is that my body composition and my body is changing. You know, and part of that is because now I'm 37 years of age and I'm not training as hard, the load is lower. And I'm probably not eating as well. I'll be straight up, like, you know, 3 kids, you know, fortunately I don't have the luxury of just waking up now in the morning and saying the one thing that I need to look after is what I eat for the rest of the day. It's kind of like the maybe last thing that comes on my mind, which is frustrating because that's the problem when you know things too. Like I know the answer to not every answer to the nutrition, but I have a good idea of what works for me, right? And I'm not, I haven't got the time to actually do it. Like me and Fiona were only chatting about it with my wife, and we were just saying like she knows too, and we're like, okay, let's just get it this week, and then you know life just gets in the way. You know, 3 kids get come first, and always will. You know, but it would be, you know, yeah, but we will immerse ourselves back in it. But anyway, like, yeah, so what's changed mainly, Daniel, and which is what we had a good conversation about was like around like my, you know, my glutes, thighs, legs, that's been the main change, right? Where like when you're training, especially like you know in Gaelic football, that's what takes the majority of the load. You're doing like mass runs, you're doing like every training session with Dublin like would have been harder. I would have worked harder in them training sessions than I probably work in a club game now. And that's partly because of different things happening in my body, but it's just a fact. And We used to train, like, so you're getting such a load, such a hit on those main muscles. And, you're going to train a half an hour earlier, you're doing glute band work, prehab work, the days off are not days off, you're doing, so, the load is just decreased. And I argue probably the calories have not been as good. And I'm not sure if I'm, if I'm on, if I'm, yeah, what the calorie deficit, surplus, balance is. We don't measure it. So you throw all those things into the mix, then every month, every, couple of months, it just gets a little bit worse, or it just changes. Maybe not say it gets a bit worse, because it's probably, but it does. Your body changes. And kind of, it's frustrating, because as I say, you kind of know like what you need to do, but you can't always carve out the time to do it. So look, so that's been part of the transition, which I found quite difficult. And I know I spoke to a load of lads about this. And even when I was in the GPA, like, there's global studies on this. Like, guys struggle with career transition for a number of different reasons. Some guys miss that buzz that we chatted about in relation to the game day. Some guys miss just the camaraderie of the dressing room because they just don't get it. They don't go to a club and play. I still have that. Some guys miss just the idea of, you wake up every morning, you've got this challenge ahead of you to be better, that continuous journey of growth. And some guys in more American football and rugby, for actually, whereby they're one of the hardest things in career transition is their body composition just changes, because they're a big, huge unit and they have to be for their role, and then they're not feeling that anymore, and then they end up like their body composition changes. So it is like probably unspoken, Daniel, to be honest with you. It's not something that a lot of lads will be out talking about, but definitely there are lads who are experiencing it, and I think there's a gap, like, even for ye guys, to help people like that, because there are, and you need to spoon feed it, because you just want to know the answer. You haven't got time to research it. You haven't got, you kind of need to make it pretty straightforward. So, and then you have to be consistent and disciplined. And when you're not in a high performance culture or arena, it's easy not to be consistent. You might do a piecemeal. So,
There was
bit of a long
something.
answer there, but it's
No, it is great. Absolutely great. That there's great quality in that. And I think it sets us up to talk more and to go into it a little bit more, just a tiny little bit more. Don't worry, we won't hold you all evening. But I want to know, do you remember what you said to me around the mindset of transition when we played that game of golf? And we was talking about that. The training element came up, and you brought something up around identity. Do you remember what you told me?
Go on, remind me.
It was in the context of how we view ourselves, and that as an athlete, it's recognizing that it's these key behaviors that give us a sense of confidence, and that have a huge element in building our self-esteem. And that in order to maintain a certain level of confidence and a certain level of that self-esteem, that physicality and our physical presence is something that we need to continue to invest in. And you're not, while you have some of a science background, I never forgot it, and I think about it so much. And it is about recognizing that you do need to reframe a different type of identity for yourself. I am a father. We have different priorities. We have a different type of routine. We have different time. We cannot be, we'll stick to to you for a moment. We can't be Paul Flynn that lived this life. We that time isn't there. So it's accepting our circumstances and adjusting our habits and our routines. And I suppose the next part of it is, what have you carried through? Because there are things that you've carried through, you've already referred to. What can people continue to carry through that's positive from what they know is effective?
What can they carry through? It's like it's a tough question, right? Because it's not one thing. I think you have to take bits of everything. That's a bit of a fudge of an answer. But like, for example, like I understand I understand the importance of gym, right? And if I can't do anything in a week, if I only have 2 days, and I would rather lift twice and do 2 really good gym sessions rather than go for 2 runs. And even though sometimes time doesn't allow me, I have to just go for a run, because like a run for me is kids are down. Okay, Fiona, I'll be back in 25 minutes. And I go for a 5K, run around the block, come back, boom, you're back in the house. You go to gym, best will in the world, it's an hour and a half, right? So, but still, it's so important, because the body composition, you can keep your body composition in decent enough shape if you do 2 to 3 gym sessions a week. Like 2 actually. If you did 2 gym sessions a week, you'd maintain it. If you did 3 good gym sessions a week, well, I suppose again, I have to relate back to me. If I did 3 gym sessions for 3 weeks on the trot, I'm pretty much back to where I'm happy again, or I'm content again.
Hallelujah. I didn't know if you give that answer, but you've talked about how it is a combination of so many things. It's a combination of mindset. It's a combination of the gym. You have components of, what works from a nutrition point of view. But what you just described is you were able to prioritize. You're able to recognize, hang on a second, I know that maintaining strength as a key facet of me as a person is a huge variable, and I can get fitness back, or I can do a running session or something further down the line, but getting that gym session is absolutely fundamental. Now, there's something else that you've just touched on that I think is really important, and that is that you said, okay, 3-4 weeks of consistency in the gym, but ultimately you haven't let the whole thing go. You've still maintained a level of structure, and you haven't let all of your habits, even as a parent, slide. Isn't that fair to say?
Listen, I think it's very fair to say. And one of the things that, like, even when I have twins who are 3, and then I've a 20-month-old, so like we're in the teeth of it, like it's pretty full on, like, and it's great. But we both made a commitment, me and Fiona, like, not we didn't write this down or anything like that, but it's just a loose enough commitment that we value exercise, and we see it as something that's important for our kids to see us going. So, they know we bring them down to the side of the football pitch all the time. The twins in particular, starting to understand what that means, and they kick the ball around and all that. But even just to know, like that, like, we nearly alternated. Like at the moment, she's training Monday, Wednesday, I train Tuesday, Thursday, and one of us does, the bedtime or whatever. And they now know, because we're coming down in our kit, and they're saying, "You're going football, daddy," or mommy. And we think that's pretty cool. And everyone to their own, right? But we like that. And obviously, ideal world, we'd be able to do it after, and they're in bed, but you can't always when you're playing team sports. But like even with the gym, like we will, we carve out time for each other, and that's not the same with all my mates. That's not the same with like everyone I know. Like, that's just something that has to give for them, because that's their time. And so everybody's circumstances are completely different, and especially when you get to this stage, because you have to, looking after the kids is number one. But it helps, is what I'm trying to say, that we both value exercise, and how not just it impacts, like, because it has an impact on the family too, because we're in better spirits. Like we know if we didn't train for 4 days in a row, like we would not be in good shape. Like psychologically, we'd be getting stressed about the smaller things. We'd be maybe, narky with the kids, like, yourself. And I don't, that's the way we would be. And I would be, I might speak for myself, I'm not fair on her, but I know I need to train. Simple as that. It's my outlet. It's something that's part of my identity, regardless of, the body composition stuff. It's my release, so it's really important. So just go back to that, because I just said that 3 gym sessions, like, but like if I even ask you, like, so the idea that like the glutes and the quads and the legs are probably, and it's not as if I'm not doing full body sessions, but it's probably important, or is it important that I blend both? Should I be getting, because the athletic, nature of running is obviously important on your legs, I'm assuming, but that's just
Yeah.
me being
So the biggest variable at play here at the moment, and it's amazing, we didn't actually get into this detail when you called, is that you have a pain pathway at the moment. And when you have pain, you have dysfunction. And when there's dysfunction, you have atrophy. So what happens, and I had a double discectomy and I have knee trouble at the moment, torn cartilage. So if there's pain, it tends to shut down the stimulus to muscle. And if the stimulus isn't there and strength and there's pain, muscle loss occurs. So what happens is that fat mass and the aggregation of fat mass is far more likely. So in injured athletes, retired athletes, or athletes who don't maintain the same level of load, the first, like the big muscles are our glutes and our trunk. So through the lower back and through the trunk and through the quads, I would see even athletes where they're back to their full strength, where they're still squatting, deadlifting, whatever it might be, until they've got the volume of running and they've got the full volume of the game stimulus and everything, there could be still a 2 kilo deficit, you know, if there's been a period where they've been injured or they've been out or it's coming back from an ACL. So the combinations of everything are really important, but it is the awareness. And this is the thing, like I am having this conversation now every week. The TED Talk of Brendan Egan has come up even with you and I. People don't recognize the value of maintaining muscle mass, and they don't realize the importance of maintaining that stimulus. It's essential for longevity, function, and life. And what you're talking about really is just, and this is what we have to get into our mindsets, it's just about maintaining what we have. You're not going to be building new levels of lean mass because we are, unfortunately, with age on the decline. We don't have the same hormonal status. We don't produce the same testosterone and growth hormone. We don't recover as quickly. So the message, and like even with you, what did I say? We have to measure it. We have to measure it, and we can't be afraid of that measurement. So one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to get you to do an in-body. And we're going to at least have a track and time of where are you now. This time next year, you want to be as close to that or better if you can. And that's the kind of thing where we think about body composition assessment immediately as what body fat am I? And that's why we need to bring in much more awareness about the understanding of muscle mass, currency for health and currency for performance. Anything that the team wants to ask Paul, we're going to wrap it up in the next minute or two.
It's not so much a question, more so just the even just an observation of the conversation and the fact that, and the way that you ended it with by speaking about how important it is to know who you are and your identity and what's important to you, what matters to you, to really know and understand, or to really, I suppose, figure out how to place those important pillars in your life. Because ultimately that's where it all stems from. It's not just a matter of, I suppose, asking someone else what to do or coming to, you know, the likes of us for the answers. It's whenever you really understand who you are, we are, I suppose, the people that can really help to, I suppose, from the education point of view. But I think just the way you spoke about it and the way it all kind of came to the end there, I think it really solidified the importance of that. So I thought that was really interesting.
Because otherwise you'll just buy in for a period of time and then you'll stop, you know, or you do some of the things that are just unnatural and not suiting your lifestyle, not suiting your overall being. And it then is just your typical fad. You know, you might get some really short wins, but it's not sustainable. But yeah, you obviously you guys know that.
When you were playing for Dublin, Paul, a huge part of your purpose was training, and it took up a lot of your time. How did you navigate that change when you had a more extra time then when you stopped playing, and I suppose a shift in your purpose? How did you navigate that?
Yeah, really, actually, unbelievable question, to be honest with you, Aoife. And it's probably something that I'd say if you ask most players, they don't figure that out. They don't think that far ahead. And it's, I suppose, when you're in that kind of bubble, you're probably spending, of your capacity in your head and your body, you're probably spending around 80% of your time in camp. That's where your head is at. Like, even though you're working, right? You know, you are working and but you just can't not be so all in. You know, I think in anything in life, if you want to be the best, you really have to be all in, you know, and that's the hardest thing about being an amateur athlete, is that you obviously can't. But like, yeah, so when you're then not in at all, it's really tricky. And I actually thought this is where you were going to go, Daniel, like in relation to when you're trying to transition out, like what you have to nearly try and do is create a ramp out of the game and not let it be a cliff edge. So, you know, when it's a cliff edge, you just fall into the issues that, you know, you can get involved in things that you shouldn't, like gambling, or this happened a lot, you know, when in global studies in relation to players leaving the game, mental health issues creep in, and it's fraught with kind of, you know, danger, you know. But if you can create a ramp out of the game, whether it be staying involved in coaching or media if you can, or you know, like us, we're very lucky in the GAA that we can play with our club. They create little mini ramps out of the game, and I think that's important. And it also helps with, like, you know, by maintaining things like your training, your nutrition. They're all part of building little ramps out of the game. And it's the same with anybody in any walk of life. Like, it's like when you retire from work, when you're on, if you're 60s and you think, oh, it's okay, I'm gonna have all this time. It's not, it's not really, you need to be prepared for it. Like, it's part of your identity, your purpose. So you have to create these little mini ramps, you know, to help make sure that you don't fall off that cliff edge. So, and I like, and even with the best will in the world, if I didn't nail that, like I had told Daniel this, like, you know, I had a tricky 6 months, I'd say, maybe longer, where you're doing all these things, but yet you still don't feel like 100%. You're like, I'm not just buzzing. I haven't got my mojo. You know, why is that? And then you realize why it is, but you can't bloody get the answer. So to leave the game, and this is the same with your club player too, or any sport. Sorry, but I just talk about what I kind of know. You have to prepare for that, and even when you prepare for it, you can identify and try to figure it out. But it will come a time where it's kind of tricky. And this, I've spoken to so many past players about this in loads of different sports, and they've all kind of experienced it. And you know, and back to what I said earlier on about the things, everyone has to kind of figure it out themselves, but try get as much support as you can from people who've gone through it, because they'll help you with it.
Thank you, Paul. Eva, did you want to come in there?
No, I was just going to say thanks for all of that. It was a really, really good insight, even into your playing career, but also that transition. So I think we're all really interested in your path, and it was really, really good insight. So thanks a million.
Thanks, Eva. And what's this body thing, Daniel, that I'm doing? Actually, that's the first I've heard of that. Is this some...
He's just dropping a coin.
Oh yes, Paul loves when I do that. He's like, "What the hell was that about?" I'll get a message afterwards, and he's like, "What the hell, in body? What are we doing with that?" But he will be all for it, particularly when he sees the data. He'll absolutely eat it up, and this is what I'm talking about. It's these little things, Paul. Like for me, I'm going to turn philosophical and turn back to process that again. Like, I feel so privileged to be able to have this conversation with my team and you. You are just such an incredible ambassador as an athlete, and you've got such a great mindset, and it's great to be able to share it with my world, and it will help so many people. So I feel very fortunate and very grateful. But it's just back to the process, and what you carry through is an element of monitoring your body in a different way. Like for me, it can be bloods, it can be getting your cholesterol checked, it can be, you know, I got my colonoscopy done, it can be dental hygiene, it can be just using the values around health to make sure that your body is in a good place. So in body is a very simple way of looking at it. It's like just a slightly less accurate way of measuring body composition compared to a DEXA. It's within about 2%. So it's much more accessible, and it gives you that feedback.
I hope the 2% is like
downwards.
Downwards. Upwards.
It actually is. So and particularly suits people who have got high levels of muscle mass. So you'll be probably very happy with your results. It'd be great for your confidence.
I need it.